Hi there, let's take a look at another exam question, a 9-mark question here on decentralisation and different leadership styles. The question sets the scene. Managers in a business have a range of leadership styles. Analyse how these different leadership styles might impact the effectiveness of a strategy to decentralise this business. 9 marks. Now, as always, the key is to unpick the demands of the question, and you might want to pause the video and have a go at that with the question on the screen there. The starting point is, what is the question all about? What does your answer need to be rooted in? And where do you need to get to the end point? Where do your arguments need to lead to as you develop your analysis? The wording is the focus of the question. What do you need to focus on? And the scope is how many arguments. So have a go, pause the video if you want to have a go at unpicking that question, and let's take a look at it. Well, the starting point, what is the question all about? Well, it's actually about decentralisation. That is what the question is all about. Not so much, it doesn't start with leadership styles, it's about decentralisation and the way in which different leadership styles might impact how effective the strategy of decentralisation is. So our starting point is decentralisation, and we need to explore the impact of different leadership styles. And specifically, the wording asks us to focus on the impact on the effectiveness of decentralisation. So that's what we need to focus on. How many arguments? Well, the answer is always in the question. Let's have a look. Analyse how these different leadership styles might impact the effectiveness. It's plural, so we need to be looking for 2 arguments here for a 9-mark question. 1 argument wouldn't be enough. The question is asking us to look at different leadership styles, plural. So 2 arguments. Well, decentralisation is what this question is all about. So hopefully you're aware of the difference between decentralisation and centralisation. And decentralisation is where decision-making, authority over decision-making is spread away from the centre. For example, to different locations, different business units, to managers elsewhere in the organisation apart from the centre, head office. Another feature of decentralisation is that it changes the nature of communication away from a top-down approach that's favoured by centralisation to very much more about a 2-way approach. And also, decentralisation encourages greater use of delegation. The question refers to leadership styles, and what that's really encouraging you to do is to pick a couple of leadership styles and explore how each might impact the effectiveness of a decentralised approach. So, in terms of this question, I've just picked 2. You could pick any 2 from the 4 of the classic leadership styles, but I just wanted to pick 2, and the points, the arguments there are just very briefly summarised on the screen. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move on from this slide in a second to show you how you might develop each of these points as a response to this question. And I've picked, I think, the 2 most obvious leadership styles, the 2 easiest to get your chain of analysis moving in the right direction, which is the autocratic leadership style and the democratic leadership style. So let's take a look at 2 examples of how you might develop arguments in response to this question. And I do encourage you to have a go at writing your own as well, because of course these are just suggested responses. They're by no means perfect, but hopefully you'll see that they do a decent job in trying to meet the demands of the question. Well, the first argument that's going to appear is one that argues that actually an autocratic leadership style is going to limit the effectiveness of decentralisation. It's going to make it less effective. So let's just read through it. If many of the managers in the business have autocratic leadership styles, then this is likely to reduce the effectiveness of a strategy to decentralise the business. So we're directly addressing the wording, the focus of the question. Why? Well, autocratic leaders prefer to hold on to as much power and decision-making authority as possible, preferring to use a command and control approach. Let's develop the analysis. Consequently, they are likely to resist sharing decision-making authority, or to a switch from a top-down approach to communication to a two-way approach. Similarly, if managers in different parts of the business are autocratic, they will be unlikely to embrace the increased use of delegation, which is usually a feature of effective decentralisation, thereby reducing the effectiveness of this strategy. So a good argument that says, look, if most of the leaders elsewhere in the business have an autocratic style, that's very much going to reduce the effectiveness of decentralisation. Well, we've given one argument, but we need a second argument. And here we're going to pick a different leadership style, and we're going to pick democratic. So let's see what this one says. So alternatively, a bit of a contrasting or counter argument, if many of the managers in different parts of the business have a democratic leadership style, then a strategy to decentralise the business is likely to be effective. Managers with a democratic style tend to embrace the sharing of decision-making authority and the greater involvement of and communication with employees in business decisions. Let's develop the argument. Why is that going to make it more effective? Well, these are important parts of decentralisation because each business unit will need to be much more actively involved in decision-making rather than just accepting instructions from the centre in a centralised approach. Democratic managers are more likely to gain the support of employees as they tend to be more consultative. So just to finish off the analysis, consequently, the different business units are more likely to accept the accountability that comes with decentralisation, since decisions will be taken more collaboratively. So that paragraph there argues that if managers in the business have a democratic style, that is likely to increase the effectiveness of decentralisation. There we go. So we've developed 2 points. Now don't forget, 9 marks, you don't have a lot of time, so you need to put those 2 arguments together fairly concisely, succinctly. You could take some words out of either of those 2 arguments, but provided you gave those 2 arguments and stayed focused on the demands of the question, the examiner will be delighted and very likely, perhaps certain, to give you a level 3 response, 7 to 9 marks. Hopefully you found that useful. Any questions or any comments on that question or the answer, please put them in the comments box below. And I'll link on the thumbnails at the end here to the playlist of other suggested answers and to other useful resources. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon to get notifications as we add new videos to the channel.